I am Hazel Bennett, 32, and last Christmas my father sent me a text that shattered my world. Thanks for existing. Don't come again. The irony? I had been financially supporting my parents for years while my sister Morgan took all the credit. That night, she casually mentioned she had told them I was just squatting in her apartment. I said nothing, but the next morning, her key wouldn't work, and 2 wrapped boxes waited outside our door. One kept moving. Before I dive into how I turned this family nightmare into the best decision of my life, let me know where you're watching from and subscribe if you've ever had to choose between family loyalty and self-respect. Growing up as the oldest of 2 daughters in what seemed like a typical middle-class American family, I never imagined I would end up financially supporting my parents while being treated like an unwelcome guest. We lived in a modest 4-bedroom home in suburban Connecticut. My father, Robert, worked as a marketing executive for a pharmaceutical company, and my mother, Diane, was an elementary school teacher. They provided us with a comfortable life. And there was always an expectation that both Morgan and I would go to college and build successful careers. From early childhood, the difference in how my parents treated Morgan and me was subtle but unmistakable. Morgan was 4 years younger, with our mother's bright blue eyes and natural charm that seemed to captivate everyone around her. She was the baby of the family, the one who could do no wrong. When she broke Mom's favorite vase at age 7, it was just an accident. When I accidentally stained the carpet with nail polish at 11, I was grounded for 2 weeks. I learned to be self-sufficient early. By 16, I was working part-time at the local library, saving for college while maintaining straight A's. Morgan, meanwhile, floated through high school on her natural intelligence and charm, rarely having to study hard for her be average. The real shift in our family dynamics began during my junior year of college. I was studying computer science at MIT on a partial scholarship, working 2 part-time jobs to cover the rest. One random Tuesday, Mom called in tears. Dad had been laid off after his company merged with a larger corporation. At 55, with 30 years at the same company, he suddenly found himself unemployed. He is devastated, Hazel. Mom sobbed over the phone. He keeps saying no one will hire him at his age. I immediately transferred half of my savings to them, about $3,000 I had been setting aside for a summer coding bootcamp. It was meant to be a temporary help until Dad found another job. But weeks turned into months, and his job search became increasingly discouraging. He was too proud to accept positions he considered beneath his previous title, turning down assistant roles and consultant positions that came with significant pay cuts. Meanwhile, Mom's rheumatoid arthritis was worsening, making her teaching job increasingly difficult. By the time I graduated with honors, she had reduced her schedule to part-time, cutting their income even further. Morgan was in her sophomore year at a state college, studying communications on our parents' dime. When I suggested she might need to take out student loans or get a job given our parents' situation, she looked at me like I had suggested she donate a kidney. They want me to focus on my studies, she said, flipping her long blonde hair over her shoulder. Besides, Dad says he's close to landing something big. That something big never materialized. Instead, I landed a position as a software engineer at a tech company in Boston, starting at $85,000 a year. It felt like a fortune after years of student poverty. My first instinct was to help my parents get back on their feet. The loans began small. $2,000 for property taxes, $1,500 for Mom's medical bills when their insurance didn't cover a new treatment, $3,000 when their furnace died in the middle of winter. Each time, Dad would promise to pay me back as soon as things turn around. By the time I was 26, I was sending them regular monthly transfers of $2,000, which they had come to depend on. It wasn't labeled as support or allowance. We maintained the fiction that these were loans or that I was helping out temporarily. Dad's pride couldn't handle the reality that his older daughter had become the family breadwinner. When the pandemic hit, everything changed again. My company went fully remote, and I made the decision to move back to my hometown. Property values in Boston had skyrocketed, and I was tired of paying $2,800 for a tiny one-bedroom apartment. More importantly, I thought being physically closer might help me get a better handle on my parents' increasingly chaotic finances. Morgan had moved back home after college, but quickly declared she needed her independence. She rented a luxury two-bedroom apartment downtown that she couldn't possibly afford on her entry-level marketing salary. When she called me complaining about the cost, I suggested we become roommates to save money. That would be amazing, she gushed. And it would be just like when we were kids. It was nothing like when we were kids. The apartment was in an upscale building with a doorman and rooftop pool. The rent was $3,000 a month, and somehow I agreed to pay $2,100 of it because I had the master bedroom and made so much more money. In reality, the bedrooms were nearly identical in size. I told myself it made sense. I could keep a closer eye on the money I was giving my parents while building a stronger relationship with my sister. It seemed like a good plan at the time. I had no idea I was walking into a trap that would eventually break my heart and my bank account. What started as temporary assistance to my parents quickly evolved into a comprehensive financial support system that drained not just my bank account, but my emotional reserves as well. By the time I moved in with Morgan, I was covering virtually all of my parents' major expenses. Their mortgage payment of $1,500 was automatically withdrawn from my account on the first of every month. Dad had refinanced years ago to pull out equity, leaving them with 15 more years of payments instead of being nearly paid off. The utilities, electricity, water, internet, and heating averaged around $350 monthly. Higher in winter months, when Connecticut temperatures plummeted and their poorly insulated house guzzled energy. Every Sunday, I would drive to Walmart or Aldi and fill 2 carts with groceries for them, carefully selecting items on sale and using coupons to stretch my dollar. The weekly grocery bill still came to approximately $200, as Dad insisted on certain brands and cuts of meat, regardless of price. I have worked hard all my life, he would say defensively when I suggested store-brand alternatives. I deserve some small pleasures. Mom's medical expenses were the most unpredictable. Her rheumatoid arthritis required specialized care, and while Medicare covered some treatments, there were substantial gaps between copays, medications not fully covered, and alternative therapies like acupuncture that provided her some relief. I was spending at least $600 monthly on her healthcare. Then there was their car, a 2019 Buick Enclave that Dad had purchased before losing his job, convinced he would find equivalent employment quickly. The monthly payment and insurance totaled $450. Which became my responsibility when they fell 3 months behind and risked repossession. All told, I was spending approximately $3,100 monthly supporting my parents, more than many people spend on rent. And that was before the emergencies that seemed to crop up with suspicious regularity: plumbing issues, dental work, property taxes they had forgotten to budget for. Meanwhile, my living situation with Morgan was becoming its own financial sinkhole. Despite our agreement to split household expenses beyond rent, I found myself purchasing all groceries, cleaning supplies, toilet paper, and even the scented candles Morgan loved to burn constantly. My credit card statements showed regular trips to Target and Whole Foods, where I would spend $300 to $400 weekly on items that disappeared at alarming rates. Morgan had an uncanny ability to be completely out of cash just when a bill arrived. "I'm waiting for my commission check," she would say apologetically, eyes wide. "I'll pay you back next week." The reimbursements rarely materialized, and when they did, they were partial amounts accompanied by elaborate explanations about unexpected expenses. Then there were the emergencies, a term Morgan used liberally. Her car needed emergency brake work, $600. Her wisdom teeth required emergency extraction, not covered by insurance, $1,200. A work trip demanded emergency new luggage and appropriate attire, $800. Each time, I transferred money to her account, telling myself these were investments in our relationship. My savings account. once robust with plans for a down payment on a condo, dwindled steadily. My 401k contributions were reduced to the minimum required for company matching. The promotion I received 6 months after moving back home, with its welcome salary increase to $110,000, made no difference to my financial situation because my expenses expanded accordingly. Friends and coworkers began questioning my choices. My best friend Catherine from college visited one weekend and was appalled by the situation. "Hazel, this is financial abuse," she said bluntly as we sat at a cafe downtown, carefully out of earshot of either my sister or parents. "You're supporting 3 adults who are perfectly capable of working." "Dad has applied for jobs," I defended weakly. "He gets interviews but never offers." "Has he applied at Home Depot? At Target? At anywhere that might not match his executive ego but would pay actual money?" Catherine pressed. The truth was he hadn't. And Morgan, despite her marketing degree and supposed commission structure, seemed perpetually broke while maintaining perfect manicures, regular hair appointments, and a closet full of clothes with tags still attached. My colleague Jeffrey, a financial advisor who had become a friend, was even more direct during our lunch break one day. "You're enabling dependency," he said, sliding a napkin with rough calculations across the table. "At this rate, you'll never retire. And what happens if you lose your job? Who takes care of all of them then?" I had no answer. The weight of responsibility felt crushing, yet the alternative, cutting off my family financially, seemed unthinkable. The guilt was overwhelming. How could I enjoy financial security while my parents struggled? What kind of daughter would I be? The cognitive dissonance was exhausting. I was simultaneously essential to my family's survival and somehow still not good enough, not as lovable as Morgan, not as respected as my father had been in his prime, not as nurturing as my mother. I was the family ATM, valued for what I provided rather than who I was. Yet I continued, month after month, transferring money, paying bills, buying groceries, and lending to Morgan. I told myself it was temporary. Dad would find a job eventually. Mom's medical expenses would stabilize. Morgan would get that big promotion she was always just on the verge of securing. I was drowning in responsibilities, but whenever I tried to discuss financial boundaries, I was met with defensiveness, accusations of selfishness, or tearful reminders of family loyalty. The emotional manipulation was as draining as the financial burden. What I didn't realize then was that my role as provider was being systematically erased from the family narrative. While I paid the bills, someone else was taking credit. The foundation for betrayal was being laid, $1 at a time. As November rolled into December, I found myself caught up in the magic of the holiday season despite the financial strain and growing tension. Christmas had always been my favorite time of year, a chance to show my love through thoughtfully chosen gifts and family traditions. I was determined to make this Christmas special, perhaps subconsciously hoping that the perfect holiday would somehow heal the fractures in our family relationships. I started shopping early, setting aside a portion of each paycheck for gifts. My budget was tight after covering everyone's expenses, but I managed to find meaningful presents within my means. For Mom, I found a beautiful cashmere scarf in her favorite shade of blue and a first edition of her beloved Jane Austen novel. For Morgan, despite our increasingly strained relationship, I purchased concert tickets to her favorite band's upcoming tour and a designer wallet she had been eyeing, bought on sale, though I knew she would never check. For Dad, I had spent months tracking down a rare collectible baseball card featuring his childhood hero, Mickey Mantle. He had mentioned it once, years ago, telling a story about how his father had owned one but sold it during hard times. The card cost nearly $800, money I couldn't really spare, but I convinced myself his face lighting up would be worth every penny. Meanwhile, Morgan's behavior grew increasingly odd as Christmas approached. She started coming home later, offering vague explanations about work events and holiday parties. Her bedroom door, previously always open, remained firmly closed when she was home. Several times I overheard her on the phone, her voice dropping to a whisper when I walked past. One evening, while preparing dinner, I clearly heard her say, It's getting unbearable. She acts like she owns the place just because. I know. We'll talk about it when I see you tomorrow. When I asked who she was speaking with, she smiled brightly and said, just a work friend. We're coordinating secret Santa gifts. The explanation seemed plausible. But something in her too wide smile made my stomach knot. I noticed she had stopped inviting me to family gatherings at our parents' house. When I mentioned dropping by to help Mom with Christmas decorations, Morgan quickly said, "Oh, I already took care of that last weekend while you were working on that project." It was true I had been working overtime on a major software launch, often logging in evenings and weekends to meet deadlines. The project had been successful, earning me recognition from senior management and promises of a substantial year-end bonus. I had already mentally allocated that money to paying off the remainder of Mom's medical bills from her most recent treatment. Dad's behavior was also shifting subtly. His usual gruff phone conversations became even shorter. Twice when I called, he handed the phone to Mom almost immediately with mumbled excuses about yard work or television programs. When I dropped off groceries, he remained in his study instead of coming out to help unload as he typically would. Mom seemed caught in the middle, her eyes worried as she hugged me at the door. "Your father is just going through a phase," she said softly during my last visit before Christmas. "The holidays are hard for him now that he's not, you know." I did know. Not working had stripped away Dad's identity, his sense of purpose. 3 years of unemployment had eroded his confidence and sharpened his pride into something brittle and dangerous. I squeezed Mom's hand and promised to make Christmas special. The week before Christmas, I baked dozens of cookies using family recipes, packaging them in festive tins for neighbors, colleagues, and of course, my family. I hung lights around our apartment windows and set up a small tree in the corner of our living room, decorating it with ornaments I had collected over the years. Morgan seemed uninterested in the decorations, making no comment when she came home to find the apartment transformed. "I thought we could watch Christmas movies this weekend," I suggested one evening, "like we used to when we were kids. I bought hot chocolate and those peppermint marshmallows you love." "Can't," she replied, not looking up from her phone. "I've got plans." I tried not to feel hurt by her dismissal. "What about Sunday?" "I was thinking we could drive out to see the Christmas light display in Madison like last year." "I'm busy Sunday too," she said, finally glancing up. "Look, Hazel, not everyone has your obsession with Christmas traditions. Some of us have social lives." The comment stung more than it should have. I retreated to my room, wrapping the last of my gifts while blinking back tears. When had my sister become so cold? When had I become the outsider in my own family? On December 23rd, I finished work early and spent the afternoon preparing a special dinner of beef bourguignon, Dad's favorite, planning to deliver it to my parents that evening. I called ahead to let them know I was coming, but Mom sounded flustered. "Tonight isn't good, sweetheart," she said, her voice strained. "Your father isn't feeling well. And we're just going to have a quiet evening." "I could just drop it off," I offered. "You wouldn't have to cook." "Better make it tomorrow," she said quickly. Christmas Eve would be lovely. I agreed, trying to ignore the sinking feeling in my stomach. After hanging up, I portioned the stew into containers and refrigerated it, then sat alone at our dining table with a glass of wine, scrolling through photos from last Christmas when we had all seemed happy together. Morgan came home around 9. Cheeks flushed from cold or wine or both. She seemed surprised to find me still up. "I thought you'd be in bed by now," she said, unwinding her scarf. "Don't you have that early morning thing tomorrow?" I did have a virtual global meeting scheduled for 6 a.m. with colleagues in Germany, but I was too unsettled to sleep. "Were you at Mom and Dad's?" I asked directly. Her hesitation was brief but noticeable. "Just for a bit. Dropped off some things Mom needed. They said Dad wasn't feeling well." "He seemed fine to me," she replied with a shrug, heading toward her bedroom. "Probably just didn't want company." Or just didn't want my company, I thought, but didn't say. That night, I lay awake for hours, a sense of foreboding washing over me in waves. Something was wrong, deeply, fundamentally wrong, but I couldn't put my finger on exactly what. All I knew was that despite my best efforts, Despite the thousands of dollars spent and countless hours invested, I felt further from my family than ever before. Christmas Eve arrived with a dusting of snow and a sky heavy with more to come. I attended my morning meeting, packaged up the stew with a fresh baguette from the local bakery, and prepared to drive to my parents' house. Before leaving, I texted Morgan. Heading to Mom and Dad's around 4. Want to ride together? Her response came an hour later. Already here. See you when you arrive. The knot in my stomach tightened. I hadn't even known she was planning to go early. As I gathered my gifts and food, I tried to shake off my unease. It was Christmas, after all. A time for family and forgiveness. Whatever tensions had been building, surely the holiday spirit would help us overcome them. I had no idea that in less than 24 hours, my entire world would collapse around me, beginning with a text message that would permanently redefine the meaning of family in my life. I woke up early on Christmas morning with that childlike excitement that never seems to fade, regardless of age. Outside, fresh snow blanketed the world in peaceful white. I made coffee and sat by our small tree, admiring how the lights twinkled in the dim morning light. Morgan's bedroom door remained closed. She had come home late last night after spending Christmas Eve at our parents', claiming she was too tired to talk. I had planned to join everyone at my parents' house around 11 for gift exchanges and Christmas brunch. Mom had texted last night confirming the time, ending with "looking forward to seeing you, sweetheart." At 8:15 a.m., my phone chimed with a text. Expecting holiday wishes from a friend, I smiled as I picked it up. The smile froze on my face when I saw it was from Dad. Thanks for existing. Don't come again. 6 words. 6 simple words that shattered my world like a hammer to glass. I stared at the message, reading it over and over, convinced I must be misunderstanding. Was this some kind of terrible joke? A phone glitch? My hands shaking, I called his number. It rang 4 times before going to voicemail. I tried again with the same result. I called Mom next, straight to voicemail. My heart pounding, I texted Mom. What's going on? Dad just told me not to come today. No response. By now fully panicked, I knocked on Morgan's door. When she didn't answer, I pushed it open to find her bed made and empty. I checked the bathroom, also empty. She had left without a word while I was sitting by the Christmas tree. I called her cell. To my surprise, she answered on the second ring. What? She sounded irritated and slightly out of breath. Where are you? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Getting ready to go to Mom and Dad's. Unlike some people, I don't wait until the last minute to shower and dress. She was already dressed in a festive red sweater dress, her hair perfectly styled, makeup flawless. She looked like she was headed to a holiday photo shoot rather than a family brunch. Dad just texted me not to come, I said, my voice cracking. What's going on, Morgan? Something flashed across her face. Satisfaction? Before she composed her features into a mask of confusion. I have no idea what you're talking about, she said, but her eyes slid away from mine. Maybe he's upset about something you did? What could I possibly have done? I asked, bewildered. I've done nothing but support this family. That's when it happened. The moment that would replay in my mind for months afterward. Morgan looked directly at me, a small smile playing at the corners of her lips. Oh, right. Your support, she said, making air quotes with her fingers. Mom and Dad were pretty upset when I told them you've just been squatting here, taking advantage of me while pretending to help them. The floor seemed to tilt beneath my feet. What are you talking about? I pay 70% of our rent. I've been covering all their bills for years. Morgan rolled her eyes. That's not what they think. I showed them my bank statements, all those transfers you've made to me for their expenses. As far as they know, I've been the one supporting them all this time. The magnitude of her betrayal was so enormous, I could barely comprehend it. All those times I had transferred money to Morgan to pass along to our parents. All those emergencies that required immediate funds. She had been systematically taking credit for my financial support while painting me as a freeloader. Why? I whispered, unable to muster more volume through my constricted throat. Why would you do this? Because I'm tired of being the lesser sister, she snapped, mask finally dropping completely. Poor Morgan. Not as smart as Hazel. Not as successful as Hazel. Not as responsible as Hazel. This way, I'm the good daughter for once. She grabbed her coat and purse, heading toward the door. Don't worry about Christmas dinner. More for me now. As she reached for the doorknob, something clicked in my brain. The transfers, I said. I have records of every transfer I've made to you, every bill I've paid directly. They'll see the truth. Morgan paused, then turned with a cold smile. Maybe someday. But today is Christmas. And they believe me. They've always preferred believing me, haven't they? Deep down, you know that. The worst part was, she was right. Our parents had always taken Morgan's word over mine. Always assumed the best of her and questioned my motives. It was a dynamic established in childhood and apparently unchanged in adulthood. After she left, I collapsed onto the sofa, numb with shock. Through a haze of disbelief, I scrolled through my phone to recent texts with my parents. Mom's messages were warm but vague, never acknowledging specific help I'd provided. Dad rarely texted at all. Had they really believed all this time that Morgan was supporting them? I forced myself to my feet and walked to Morgan's room. This time, I really looked around. The designer clothes hanging in her closet, tags still attached to many. The collection of expensive makeup on her vanity. The new laptop and tablet on her desk. All purchased with money meant for our parents. In her dresser drawer, beneath some scarves, I found a small notebook. Inside were calculations, amounts I had given her for our parents with corresponding smaller amounts noted as forwarded. The difference, often hundreds or thousands of dollars, was marked as my share. She had been systematically skimming money intended for our parents' care, sending them just enough to maintain the illusion while pocketing the rest. More disturbing were printed screenshots of text conversations with our parents. One from Dad read, "Morgan, we're worried about Hazel. Her behavior is becoming erratic. Living off you while pretending to be successful isn't healthy." Morgan's response, "I know. I'm trying to help her, but it's hard. I think she resents how close we all are." They had constructed an entire alternate reality where I was the troubled one, the jealous one, the failure, while Morgan was the successful, supportive daughter holding everything together. Rage unlike anything I'd ever experienced surged through me. I wanted to storm over to my parents' house and force them to see the truth. I wanted to expose Morgan's lies and manipulations. I wanted to scream and break things and make them feel a fraction of the pain tearing through me. Instead, I sat down at my computer and began pulling records. Bank statements showing transfers to Morgan and direct payments to my parents' mortgage company and utility providers. Email confirmations of bill payments. Credit card statements detailing groceries purchased and delivered to their home. Years of financial support meticulously documented. Hours passed as I compiled the evidence. Outside, snow continued to fall. Christmas lights twinkled on neighboring buildings and families celebrated together. Inside my apartment, the festive decorations seemed to mock me as I built a case to prove my own decency to people who should have known it without evidence. My phone remained silent except for messages from friends wishing me Merry Christmas. No calls from Mom questioning Dad's text. No apology for Morgan. Nothing. Around sunset, exhausted and emotionally drained, I finally stopped working. The reality of spending Christmas night alone, unwanted by my family despite years of sacrifice, crashed over me in waves. I curled up on the sofa and allowed myself to cry, deep, wrenching sobs that came from a place of profound betrayal. When the tears finally subsided, something had changed within me. The hurt remained, but alongside it grew a different feeling, clarity. For years, I had allowed my family to take and take, offering love, respect, and gratitude in meager portions in return. I had accepted scraps from the emotional table while providing the entire financial meal. No more. As darkness fell completely outside my window, I made a decision. This betrayal would not destroy me. Instead, it would be the catalyst for reclaiming my life, my finances, and my self-respect. My family had shown me exactly who they were and where I stood with them. Now it was time to show them who I really was, not a doormat, not an ATM. but a woman of strength who would no longer tolerate abuse. My Christmas gift to myself would be freedom from toxic family dynamics. And my parting gift to them would ensure they never forgot the truth again. The hours after Morgan's departure stretched into one of the longest nights of my life. Christmas music played softly from my neighbors' apartments, a cheery soundtrack to my personal nightmare. My phone buzzed occasionally with holiday wishes from friends and colleagues, each message a painful reminder of the family gathering I had been explicitly uninvited from. Catherine called around 7, her voice warm with holiday cheer. "Merry Christmas. How's the family madness going?" I couldn't maintain the pretense. "They told me not to come," I said, my voice cracking. "Morgan has been taking credit for all my financial support and convinced them I'm some kind of freeloader." "What?" Catherine's shock was palpable. "That's insane. You've been supporting them for years." Apparently not according to their version of reality. Catherine immediately offered to drive up from New York to be with me, but I declined. "I need to process this alone," I told her. "Figure out what happens next." After we hung up, I turned off my phone. I couldn't bear any more cheerful messages or concerned inquiries. The silence of the apartment enveloped me like a heavy blanket as I sat on the couch, staring at the small Christmas tree I had so carefully decorated. Under the tree sat wrapped presents that would now never be delivered: the baseball card for Dad, the cashmere scarf for Mom, the concert tickets for Morgan. Gifts purchased with money I couldn't spare, for people who had discarded me without a second thought. I moved to the kitchen and poured a glass of the expensive wine I'd bought for our holiday dinner. Taking a sip, I let the reality of my situation sink in fully for the first time. For years, I had been living in a financial pressure cooker of my own creation, supporting 3 adults who were capable of supporting themselves. Dad was only 58, far from retirement age, and physically healthy. His refusal to accept lesser employment was a choice, not a necessity. Mom's health issues were real, but she could have worked part-time in numerous capacities less physically demanding than classroom teaching. And Morgan had been playing me for a fool since the day I moved in, living luxuriously on my dime while painting me as the villain. I opened my laptop and logged into my bank account, forcing myself to look at the cold, hard numbers. My savings account contained just $4,230, barely 1 month's expenses if I lost my job. My 401k was significantly behind where it should be for someone my age and income level. I had been pouring money into my family's bottomless needs while neglecting my own financial security. The realization was both devastating and liberating. I had allowed this to happen. I had enabled their dependency, accepted their emotional manipulation, and participated in the fiction that my support was temporary. The hard truth was that they had no incentive to change as long as I continued enabling them. I pulled out a notebook and began making lists. First, a detailed accounting of all financial support I had provided over the past 3 years. Parents' mortgage, $54,000, $1,500 times 36 months. Utilities, approximately $12, $350 times 36 months. Groceries, approximately $31,200, $200 times 156 weeks. Mom's medical expenses, approximately $21,600, $600 times 36 months. Car payment and insurance, $16, $450 times 36 months. Emergency expenses, approximately $15,000. The total was staggering, nearly $150,000 over 3 years. And that didn't include what I had spent supporting Morgan's lifestyle. Next, I listed my immediate action items. 1. Contact locksmith first thing tomorrow. 2. Document everything. 3. Prepare evidence packages. 4. Find new living arrangement. 5. Cut off all financial support. 6. Consult attorney about possibly recovering misappropriated funds. The act of planning, of taking control, calmed the swirling emotions inside me. This was no longer about hurt feelings or family dynamics. This was about financial abuse and fraud. Morgan had essentially stolen from me by accepting money under false pretenses. My parents had benefited from my support while believing, or choosing to believe, her lies. Around midnight, I went to Morgan's room again and methodically photographed evidence of her extravagant spending. The designer clothes, the high-end electronics, the expensive makeup. I found receipts for spa treatments, weekend getaways, and restaurant meals costing hundreds of dollars, all dated within days of my emergency transfers to her. In her desk drawer, I discovered more damning evidence, a leather-bound planner where she had actually recorded which expenses she claimed to have covered for our parents versus what she actually gave them. One entry read, Hazel transferred $2,000 for mom's procedure. Sent them $800, told them insurance covered the rest. Shopping spree. My hands shook with rage as I photographed page after page of her calculated deception. This wasn't opportunistic, it was premeditated and ongoing. She had been systematically stealing from me while turning our parents against me. I returned to my computer and drafted 2 letters. The first was addressed to my parents, detailing every penny I had contributed to their support, with attached bank statements and receipts as evidence. The second was to Morgan, informing her that I would be consulting an attorney regarding the funds she had misappropriated, and that our living arrangement was terminated, effective immediately. As I worked, a plan began forming in my mind. The package of financial evidence would go to my parents, but it needed something more. Something that would ensure they couldn't simply discard it without looking inside. That's when I remembered the hamster. Last week, I had noticed a small pet store had opened nearby. On my way home, I had stopped in, drawn by the tiny faces in the window. The store owner had shown me their hamsters, small, gentle creatures that she claimed made wonderful pets. They teach responsibility, she had said. They depend entirely on their owners for care. It was perfect. A living symbol of dependency, of responsibility, exactly what my family had become to me and what Morgan needed to learn. By 3 a.m., my plan was fully formed. I would visit the pet store as soon as it opened. The hamster would go in one box, along with care supplies and a note explaining its significance. The financial documentation would go in another. Both would be wrapped in Christmas paper and left outside the apartment door after I changed the locks. The symmetry felt right. For years, I had been giving and giving to my family, receiving little in return. My final gift to them would be the truth, uncomfortable, inconvenient, and impossible to ignore, just like a living creature that needed care. I finally went to bed around 4, physically and emotionally exhausted, but with a strange sense of peace. Tomorrow would be difficult. But it would also be the first day of my new life, a life where I prioritized my own well-being and surrounded myself with people who valued me for who I was, not what I could provide. As I drifted off to sleep, I realized something remarkable. For the first time in years, I wasn't worrying about anyone else's bills, anyone else's needs, anyone else's approval. The weight of constant responsibility had lifted, replaced by the lightness of impending freedom. Outside, the snow continued to fall, covering the world in clean, untouched white, a blank page waiting for a new story to be written. I woke with the first light of December 26th, my mind immediately clear about what needed to be done. There was no grogginess, no moment of forgetting yesterday's events, just crystalline clarity and purpose. I checked my phone, no messages from my parents, no calls from Morgan. Their silence confirmed what I already knew. They had written me off, believing Morgan's elaborate lies without question. My first call was to 24/7 emergency locksmith services. The dispatcher promised someone would arrive within the hour. Next, I called the pet store owner, explaining my unusual request. She seemed puzzled, but agreed to open early for me given the circumstances. The brown teddy bear hamster you liked is still here, she said. He's very gentle, perfect for a beginner. And you'll include everything needed for his care. I confirmed. Complete starter kit. Food, bedding, water bottle, exercise wheel, the works. By 8:30 a.m., I had picked up the hamster, now nestled in a small travel cage. His tiny black eyes watched me curiously as I carried him to my car. You're part of an important lesson, I told him, feeling slightly ridiculous talking to a rodent but needing to explain myself to someone. Back at the apartment, the locksmith was finishing up. All done, ma'am, he said, handing me 2 new keys. The old ones won't work anymore. I paid him, adding a generous tip for the holiday service, and immediately set up a small security camera facing the door. It connected to my phone, allowing me to monitor the entrance remotely. Next came the packages. For my parents, I prepared a large box containing printed bank statements, transfer receipts, and a detailed accounting of every dollar I had provided for their support over the past 3 years. On top, I placed a letter explaining Morgan's deception and my decision to end financial support effective immediately. The documentation was irrefutable: dates, amounts, account numbers, all meticulously organized. For Morgan, I prepared the hamster's permanent habitat, a spacious cage with colorful tubes, an exercise wheel, and all necessary supplies. I attached a note. Since you've been living like a pet, completely taken care of without appreciation, here's a real pet to teach you responsibility. His name is Karma. Everything you need for his care is included. Consider this my parting gift. I wrapped both boxes in festive paper with large bows, the final Christmas presents I would ever give my family. Then I placed them outside the apartment door, positioning them to be immediately visible when Morgan returned. With everything in place, I packed an overnight bag and booked a room at the Marriott downtown. I couldn't bear to be present for the inevitable confrontation, but I needed to witness Morgan's reaction. The security camera would allow me to observe from a safe distance. As I waited in my hotel room, watching the camera feed on my phone, I felt strangely calm. There was no anxiety, no second-guessing my decision. For too long, I had allowed myself to be exploited financially and emotionally abused by the people who should have loved me most. Today marked the end of that chapter. At 11:43 a.m., the elevator doors opened, and Morgan appeared, still wearing yesterday's Christmas outfit, though considerably less fresh-looking. She approached our door, fishing keys from her purse with a yawn. When she inserted the key and it failed to turn, confusion crossed her face. She tried again, jiggling the handle more forcefully. After several unsuccessful attempts, she noticed the packages. Irritation flashed across her features as she bent to examine them. The box containing the hamster moved slightly, causing her to jump back in surprise. Cautiously, she read the tags, her expression morphing from confusion to anger. She pulled out her phone, presumably calling me. I had blocked her number, so the call went straight to voicemail. Next, she tried the building superintendent, gesturing animatedly as she spoke. I knew what she would learn, as the lease was in my name and I had continued to live there. I had every right to change the locks. For nearly 20 minutes, Morgan alternated between trying her key, making phone calls, and staring at the packages with growing frustration. Finally, she ripped open the hamster box, her mouth forming a perfect O of shock as she realized what was inside. The tiny creature scurried around his new home, oblivious to the drama he was part of. The documentation box remained untouched as Morgan struggled to process this turn of events. She sank to the floor, the hamster cage beside her, the reality of her new situation finally sinking in. At 12:37 p.m., my parents arrived. Dad looked grim, Mom anxious as they hurried down the hallway to Morgan. Dad tried his own key, likely a spare Morgan had given him, with the same result. After a brief discussion, they opened the second package. Even through the small phone screen, I could see the blood drain from my father's face as he leafed through the contents. Mom covered her mouth with her hand, tears forming in her eyes. Morgan tried to speak, but Dad silenced her with a raised hand, continuing to examine the documentation. They stayed in the hallway for over an hour, going through the papers, occasionally arguing, Mom crying, Dad's face growing increasingly flushed. Morgan alternated between defensive gestures and slumped defeat. Several times, Dad pointed at her accusingly. The hamster cage sat forgotten nearby, its occupant now asleep in his cedar bedding. Eventually, They gathered the papers and the hamster and left, Morgan trailing behind them like a scolded child. The hallway emptied, leaving only discarded wrapping paper as evidence of the morning's events. I checked out of the hotel that afternoon and returned to the apartment. It felt different somehow, lighter, as if a toxic presence had been removed from the air itself. I spent the evening deep cleaning, opening windows despite the cold, symbolically and literally clearing out the remnants of Morgan's presence. The messages began that evening. First from Mom, a long, tearful voicemail. "Hazel, I don't know what to say. We had no idea. Morgan told us. Please call me back. Please." I didn't. Dad texted near midnight. "We need to talk. This is a misunderstanding." I responded with one word: no. Morgan sent a series of increasingly desperate messages. "You can't just throw me out. Where am I supposed to go? This isn't legal. I'll sue you. Please, Hazel. I'm sorry. I didn't mean for it to go this far. The hamster bit me. What am I supposed to do with it? Dad is furious. They're making me stay in the guest room. This is all your fault." I blocked her number after that last message. Her problems were no longer mine to solve. Over the next few days, I contacted the utility companies and canceled all services I had been paying for at my parents' house. I emailed their mortgage company withdrawing my automatic payments. I called my credit card company and removed Morgan as an authorized user on my account, a courtesy I had extended years ago for emergencies that had morphed into regular shopping sprees. Mom continued calling from different numbers after I blocked hers. Eventually, I sent her a text. "I need time and space. I'll contact you when I'm ready." Further attempts to reach me will result in complete permanent disconnection. The calls stopped. Dad sent one final text. "You've made your point. Let's discuss a reasonable solution." I didn't respond. There was nothing to discuss. I had spent years being reasonable while they took advantage of my generosity. No more. A week after Christmas, I received a formal letter from my parents acknowledging the financial support I had provided and expressing deep regret for the misunderstanding. Enclosed was a check for $5,000, a pitiful fraction of what they owed me, but more acknowledgement than I had expected. I donated the money to a financial literacy nonprofit that specialized in helping women recognize and escape financially abusive relationships. Morgan was evicted from my life as completely as she had been from my apartment. Through mutual acquaintances, I learned she had been forced to get a second job to afford her own place after our parents, newly aware of their financial reality, could no longer supplement her income. And the hamster? He remained with Morgan, a daily reminder of responsibility and consequences that she couldn't ignore or explain away. As January turned to February, I felt myself growing stronger, more centered. For the first time in years, I was saving substantial portions of my income. I joined a support group for survivors of family financial abuse, finding solace and wisdom in others' similar experiences. The sweet revenge wasn't in punishing my family. It was in reclaiming my self-respect, my financial security, and my peace of mind. I had stood up for myself in a way I never had before, and in doing so, discovered a strength I hadn't known I possessed. The family that had defined me for so long no longer held that power. I was defining myself now on my own terms, and it felt like freedom. 6 months after the Christmas that changed everything, I stood in the center of my new apartment, surrounded by moving boxes and the clean slate of fresh beginnings. The space was smaller than what I had shared with Morgan, a one-bedroom in a renovated brownstone, but it was entirely mine, filled with only my things and my energy. Through the open windows, summer sunshine streamed in, catching on the crystal suncatcher Catherine had given me as a housewarming gift. "For your fresh start," she had said, hugging me tightly. "To remind you that light comes after darkness." The months following the Christmas confrontation had been a journey of healing, boundaries, and rediscovery. Initially, the silence from my family had been deafening, a void where constant demands and drama had once resided. I filled that space deliberately, first with therapy sessions twice weekly, then with activities I had abandoned during years of caretaking, hiking on weekends, cooking classes, book club meetings. My career flourished as I redirected energy previously consumed by family drama. The promotion I received in March came with another salary increase and greater responsibilities. Your focus has been extraordinary these past few months, my manager commented during my review. Whatever changed, it's working for you. What had changed was everything. Free from financially supporting 3 adults, I created a proper budget for the first time in years. Each month, I watched my savings account grow, my retirement contributions increase, and my anxiety decrease. I consulted a financial planner who helped me establish long-term goals and investment strategies. By summer, I had saved enough for a modest emergency fund and the security deposit on my new apartment. The relationship with my mother evolved slowly, beginning with tentative text messages 3 months after Christmas. Our first in-person meeting was at a neutral coffee shop halfway between our homes. She looked older somehow, the lines around her eyes deeper. "I'm sorry," were her first words, spoken softly across the table. "We failed you as parents." "Yes," I agreed, neither accusatory nor forgiving. "You did." That honesty, the ability to acknowledge hurt without minimizing it, became the foundation of our new relationship. Mom had found part-time work as an administrative assistant at a doctor's office, ironically using skills she had always possessed but never deployed while depending on me. "Your father still struggles," she admitted during our third meeting. "His pride, it's hard for him to face what happened." "His pride is not my responsibility," I replied, a statement that would have been impossible for me to make a year earlier. Dad and I exchanged occasional text messages, formal and distant. He never apologized directly, but sent a card on my birthday with a gift certificate and the handwritten note, "I respect the woman you've become." It wasn't forgiveness, but it was acknowledgement, perhaps all we would ever have. Morgan remained cut off completely. She had reached out multiple times through various channels, her messages alternating between hostile accusations and tearful pleas for reconciliation. I maintained my boundary with unwavering resolve. Some betrayals run too deep for second chances. Surprisingly, the hamster became a strange connection point. Mom mentioned occasionally that Karma, Morgan had kept the name, was thriving under her care. She couldn't handle him. Mom explained. Too much responsibility. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. Beyond family dynamics, my social world expanded in unexpected ways. Without the constant drain of supporting others, I had energy to nurture friendships and even begin dating. In May, I met Daniel, a kind-hearted architect with his own history of family complications. Our shared understanding of complex family bonds created an immediate connection. "It's rare to meet someone who really gets it," he said during our third date. "Who understands that family isn't always the safe harbor it's supposed to be." Work brought its own rewards beyond financial security. With my mind clear of constant worry about my family's needs, my creativity and problem-solving abilities flourished. I led the development of a new software feature that became one of our company's most praised innovations, earning recognition from senior leadership and industry peers alike. One sunny Saturday in July, I sat on my new balcony, coffee in hand, reflecting on the transformative months since Christmas. The journey hadn't been easy. There had been nights of questioning my decisions, days of grieving the family relationships I had once believed in, moments of anger so intense they took my breath away. But those difficult emotions had been necessary steps on the path to healing. I had learned crucial lessons that would guide me for the rest of my life. True generosity comes from love, not obligation or guilt. When giving depletes rather than fulfills you, it's not generosity. It's exploitation. Boundaries aren't selfish, they're essential. By establishing clear limits on what I would and would not accept, I had created space for authentic relationships based on mutual respect. Family is defined by actions, not blood. The support group members who held space for my pain, the friends who showed up consistently, the colleagues who celebrated my successes, they had demonstrated more family values than those who shared my DNA. Financial independence is a form of self-respect. By rebuilding my savings and securing my future, I was honoring my own worth in tangible ways. Sometimes the greatest gift we can give ourselves is the courage to walk away from those who don't value us, even when those people are family. The doorbell rang, interrupting my reflections. It was Catherine, arriving early to help organize my new kitchen. Behind her stood two other friends from my support group, arms full of housewarming gifts and takeout containers. "We thought you could use some help in celebration," Catherine said, hugging me. As we unpacked boxes and arranged furniture, sharing stories and laughter, I realized that the family Christmas I had been excluded from had actually been a gift, the gift of freedom to create a life filled with people who genuinely cared about my well-being. The pain hadn't disappeared entirely. There would always be a sadness for what should have been, for the loving family I had deserved but never truly had. But that sadness no longer defined me or limited my joy. I had emerged from the crucible of betrayal stronger, wiser, and surrounded by authentic connections. The price had been high, but the reward, a life built on self-respect and genuine relationships, was immeasurable. So what about you? Have you ever had to make the difficult choice between family loyalty and self-respect? Have you struggled with setting boundaries with loved ones who take more than they give? Share your experiences in the comments below. Sometimes knowing we're not alone in these challenges is the first step toward healing. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that it's okay to choose yourself sometimes. Thank you for joining me on this journey. And remember, the family you choose can be more precious than the family you're born into.